paranormal. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, boys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted. This week, though, we're going to be talking a little bit differently. My guest is John Vandeventer. He is an Air Force veteran, technical sergeant. His interest in military aviation, his interest in UFOs, cryptids, all kinds of paranormal phenomenon, got him to, and he'll tell the story, he just was telling me, to become an author. Well, he's a full-time author now. He's writing novels, but it embodies his research and his beliefs in, again, aliens, cryptids, all of it. So without hanging around with me, let's talk to, I guess we can still say technical sergeant, John Vandeventer. How you doing, John?
Good, Dan. Thank you for having me on. And actually, I didn't stick around and retire, so I don't have the title. It was just the last rank I held. So.
Oh, well, close enough.
Yeah, I have to go by Mister. I don't get to go by Sergeant, which is fine by me anyway. I got tired of playing Sergeant.
You know, we were talking before the show a little bit, and you were bringing up about you was not ever planning to be a writer.
No, not at all.
And how did we get into this then?
Well, I had a friend. In fact, we played an online flight sim together for years. And how the whole thing really happened was on Friday nights, we'd recreate battles from World War II. There'd be like 500 people on there. And when you fly the flight sim, if you go in just playing, if you get shot down, you get a new airplane. Well, on these Friday night things, if you're shot down, you're shot down. It's over. You're done for the night. And they last about 3 hours, so you want to stay alive as long as possible. So it was Operation Torch. We were supposed to patrol part of the North African coast, and we're going along, and he's talking about seeing a Bigfoot in Florida when he was a kid. And he's got the other guys kind of enthralled and stuff, and I'm looking around, and I see all these dots coming from our 9 o'clock, and I called out, "Bogey's 9 o'clock," and I broke into them. Well, they just kept going down the coast talking about Bigfoot, and lucky me, I ran into 10 Germans. So I didn't last long, and I was kind of upset. So as I'm floating down in my cyber parachute, I'm berating him on the radio, telling him how stupid Bigfoot is and what an idiot he is. And, you know, I reverted to 12 years old. And in the morning when I was back to being 50-something, I called him. I said, "Dude, I apologize. I just got pissed." He's like, "Oh, no problem." And then a couple of weeks later, I saw a link for that movie Exists or something like some Bigfoot thing. And I sent it to him, and he said, "Hey, let's make a short thing. I need a short story on film," because he had a production company, makes commercials, "and I want you to write it." And I didn't really want to, but I got talked into it. And so he was giving me all the information. The story was going to be in Ohio where he lived, and I was in Texas. So started on it, and then a few weeks later, he came back and said, "Hey, I got to drop that. I just got a big contract in LA, and it's going to make me a lot of money, and I don't have time for this Bigfoot thing." And I was really relieved, you know, and I was like, okay. Well, I printed out what I'd written, and I had it sitting at my desk, and my sister was in visiting from Arkansas, and she picked it up, started reading it. She goes, "You need to turn this into a novel." I didn't want to, but I knew I would relent and do it for her because she was like my mother figure, and so, you know, anything to keep her happy. So I ended up really hot and heavy researching Bigfoot. I even went out on a few Bigfoot hunts with people, with groups that did investigations, and got pretty interested in it. And there was a lot of facets to it, like, you know, government cover-ups and, you know, people disappearing in parks. The David Paulides thing was real big then, the missing 411 when I started writing.
Yeah.
So I thought some of that could be due to Bigfoot, I guess. And then just other besides the government cover up the people that, say they disappear. They've seen them like go through portals. And I thought, well, it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of stuff to this. So I tried to add everything I could to the book. And funny thing, about this time, I was about ready to put the completed manuscript to the publisher. I met my wife, and it took me 4 months to get a date with her. So I mean, and it was a hard 4 months. I mean, it took a lot of convincing to get her to go out to dinner with me. And I remember I wanted to take her to Texarkana. We lived in Sulphur Springs, Texas. But I was taking her to Texarkana because there's better restaurants there. So we're in the truck and we're heading to Texarkana. And she says, I heard you wrote a book. What's it about? And I'm thinking, it took me 4 months to get you in that seat. There ain't no way I'm going to tell you I wrote a Bigfoot book. I wouldn't tell her. And so finally I admitted, okay, it's a Bigfoot book, but it's a novel. But I tried to make it as realistic on actual Bigfoot reports and, encounter reports, and people have had positive, negative encounters. And she says, I always thought if those things exist, they might be a form of Nephilim. And I'm like, Nephilim what? She said, Nephilim, have you read the Bible? I said, well, no, I haven't. And she said, well, you should, and go to Genesis chapter 6 and start there. If you have any questions, let me know. Well, I didn't know. She's Hispanic. She grew up in El Paso. And I think it was age 18, she had a little mutiny and decided to leave the Catholic Church. And she joined a Messianic Jewish synagogue, which Messianic Jews are Jews that believe Christ was the Messiah.
Okay.
So I said, okay, so you're basically Christian. She goes, well, they're Jewish, but yeah, But the thing of it was, she had learned in those years she spent there, she'd learned to start reading Hebrew. And every morning she gets up and she gets in the Torah and she transcribes from the Hebrew straight into English and gives you the proper meaning, because a lot in the Old Testament got watered down. So I'd never heard about the fallen angels mating with human women and making these creatures called the Nephilim.
Okay.
And then she pointed out to me, a lot of people don't realize that the flood, and these are things I had why I couldn't get into Christianity. I couldn't understand how we were sending our heads off now. And back then they got the flood for their efforts. And then I couldn't understand this God that loves me and loves everybody, but he ordered Joshua and Caleb to wipe out tribes, whole tribes, men, women, children, even their animals. And I couldn't understand that. And she said, because it was a seed war, Satan was trying to spread a seed, because if he could get his DNA in the whole human race, there was no way a redeemer could be born. And so the flood was as much about getting rid of the Nephilim as it was about sin. And I never realized that, but it made sense. And then when she told me about Joshua and Caleb, same thing. There was a second incursion, and they had to get to, they had to wipe out the fallen angel being, from the human race. And so that made sense to me. And I was like, well, why the animals? She goes, because they tore up the animals too. And she goes, a lot of those Greek and mythological creatures and stuff, because they very well could have existed because of these fallen angels doing these things. They were just, doing everything they could to wipe out God's creations. And man, the lights just started coming on.
Okay.
And then, I'd always been interested in UFOs since I was a little kid. And, I, like you said in my bio, I loved anything that flew. And I was really into military aircraft. But I think when I discovered UFOs, that was fascinating to me too.
Sure.
And so I started looking at that again, because I started reading some books and listening to some podcasts where people said, UFOs are probably angel technology, fallen or otherwise. And then, I started noticing, as I read on, did more study, if you take a modern day UFO abduction, alien abduction, and the things they do to the females, and it's the same as an incubus or succubus attack from the Middle Ages. I'm thinking, man, there may be something there. I thought, I think I'm going to take my books this direction, kind of toward a biblical answer for things. And so it just gave me a line on a bunch of new books, like Relics 1 is the first book. Relics is basically a Bigfoot story, but after what Monica told me, oh, that's another thing too. All my characters in my books, I didn't use names of anybody I know because I didn't want people coming back saying, "Hey, is that me?"
Yeah.
So one of the main characters' names was Monica, and then boom, Monica walks into my life. So people are like, "So is Monica based on your wife?" I said, "No, I actually, even though their physical descriptions are very similar, I actually no, I didn't know Monica when I wrote the first book."
Right.
So I published Relics. It came out in 2017. Did pretty good with the Bigfoot people. The editing and stuff isn't that hot, but in fact, I'm getting it reworked. It's things you learn as you go along. Not intending to be a writer, I figured when you hire an editor, they would clean all that up. Well,
Yeah, no.
I think you do it, yeah, but they run it through software. Well, there's a lot of stuff you're going to miss with software.
Mm-hmm.
So people love the stories, they love the characters. I do take some dings on the editing, and some comments, but so I came out with 2 using the same characters. Now this time I added UFOs, and I brought in a fallen angel who was trying to control this area of southeastern Oklahoma, and his name's Nergal, and he was actually worshipped in ancient Mesopotamia, and I thought, well, that's an interesting guy. I'll use him, and I've added that to it, and I brought in more characters, and I also so I did Relics 1, 2, and 3. And 3 looked like there was gonna be a happy ending. Well, things pop again in 2025. I've started a new series. The first book's out called The Fall, which is Hebrew for fallen, about the fallen angels, and it's kind of like a what is that thing? Blue beam conspiracy thing.
Sure.
These aliens come back
Project
and they're
Blue
trying
Beam.
to convince the human race, hey, we're the ones that made you. I'm your father. I planted the seed in Neanderthal, and a lot of people are buying it, and they're taking these implants, which is basically kind of like the mark of the beast. But this isn't the final deal. This is kind of a rogue fallen angel acting on it, making his own tribulation.
Okay.
bringing on his own version of Revelation, and so people are just flocking to this, and they're getting the chip, and it changes them. It messes their DNA up and does weird things to their eyes and their senses, and they lose a lot of their humanity. And so I'm working on the second book and then sequel now, or the sequel to the first book in that series, and I bring in because the characters are liked so much in Relics. I decided to bring them, and I hooked them up with some off characters that had come from Europe and stuff in the last book. And then I wrote 3 novels for young adults called Shadow Chasers, and they all take place in this area too. Well, the nice thing about that is I got to the fall, I figured out, hey, those teenagers, they've grown up now and they're adults, and I can bring them in. And so I've been able to kind of keep the story going and keep everybody's favorite characters in it. And the stories, I was living in Texas when all this started. And when I figured out I was going to need my own area, I wasn't going to use Ohio anymore.
Okay.
I started looking around. I ran across Hanobi, Oklahoma, and all these Bigfoot sightings in southeastern Oklahoma. Well, that was just 2.5 hours away. And I come up here, and good Lord, I grew up in Texas and been to Oklahoma 100 times,
Right.
but I've never been here. I didn't know they had mountains. And we live in this beautiful valley, mile-wide valley in the Kiamichi Mountains, and in Hanobi, Oklahoma. It's the place that was supposed Bigfoot attack back in 2000.
Okay.
And it's just beautiful. Now, we're 17 miles from the nearest gas station. We're 19 miles from the post office. We're 60 miles from a Walmart.
Wow.
20-something miles from a Dollar General. So you got to be committed to live out here. But it's pretty funny. I mean, because I thought, well, what a great place that would be to live. And how things start. Weirdest thing was I was a copier tech, and the company I worked for we picked up all the Choctaw Nation casino business.
Sure.
We got all their printers, all their copiers, all their faxes. So we were having to drive up here from Texas, and we were getting home late, and it was a big hassle. Well, they needed somebody in Oklahoma, and I said, "Hey, I'll move up there." They said, "You will?" I said, "Yeah, I know right where I want to go." So yeah, Monica and I come up. We found this little house and 5 acres in the middle of nowhere, and bought it, and couldn't be happier. So it's all kind of worked out.
Having come from Texas and all of that, and you had some medical work done in Arkansas, do you remember a movie back in '72? And it was called The Legend of Boggy Creek.
I certainly do. I remember going to see it. And I was tempted to use the Falk, Arkansas area for the setting for relics. And then I started weighing it too, and I said, I hate swamps. I love mountains. Kenobi it is. And I couldn't use Kenobi because we don't have a police department or hospital or anything. So I used Tallahena, which is 24 miles north on the other side of the mountains. I used it as a setting for the first book. Most of the characters come from it. Now, I did use Kenobi for the second book. And then a friend was telling me about some really weird stuff in Heavener, Oklahoma, about 35 miles from here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to use it for the third book in the Relic series.
Okay.
Really neat thing there is they had these coal mines, and in 1928 in Coal Mine 5, and it's still shut down. Guys were down real far, I don't know how deep, something like 2,000 feet, or they were back 2,000 feet in it. And they came across polished cement pillars and a wall that were polished. And the rock they were in was like 230 million years old. And they came out, they told the management. The management had the government come in, and the government came in and inspected it. They came out and they flooded that mine. It's never been used again. It's still closed. So that's a story anyway. So that worked right into my fallen angel stuff. So I used it. And there's a lot of folklore in this part of southern Oklahoma. It's pretty interesting. So we came here in March 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hot to see a Bigfoot. Did see one, and I was going out with these field investigators and hunters, and never really saw anything. Had some weird stuff happen in Arkansas, a place called Longpool. Got kind of scary. But as far as here,
what happened there?
Well, we started getting stomping noises. There was something running around, and we could never get a light on it. And then a big rock come rolling in by the campfire, and we're out. There's nobody out. This is during the week, and there's no other campers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, it's probably hillbillies or something out here wanting to run us off. Maybe they poach here or something. I don't know. But we never could get a light on it. And then we started hearing grunts, and, I never knew what it was. Now, I did find footprints out there. But then again, the thing with footprints, they're tricky because, they'll just end, and where they end, there should be another footprint. So you got to wonder, okay, is this somebody doing this, or I just don't know. And here's an interesting story for you before I get on to my stuff. The reason my sister wanted me to write that book is they lived in White County. Well, she passed away a couple of years ago, but they lived in White County, Arkansas, near Romance was the name of the place. And she said, we had weird stuff happen. We get weird screams, and something would beat on the side of the barn at night. And something would scream at us from the woods, and we didn't really know what it was. And she said, but one evening, now her husband worked for the railroad in Little Rock for 30 years, and he worked swing shift. And she goes, one evening, it was just about dark, and it was snowing real heavy, and she had her granddaughters over, and they were making cookies. And she said, I saw these footprints in the snow. And she goes, I went out to the porch and looked. She goes, they were big, barefoot footprints. And she goes, it scared me to death. So I went in and I, closed all the blinds and stuff. And she couldn't get a hold of Denny, her husband, until he was off work. Well, they just went to bed. And he came home at, he gets there about 1:30 or so after he gets off at midnight. And he saw the footprints right away. And he took a flashlight, followed them. Well, he went around their house. They came out of the woods, went around their house, and went to the window overlooking the kitchen sink. And then they just stopped there.
Okay.
I said, what do you mean they stopped there? He goes, it's like whatever was there was gone. He goes, there was no tree. There was no more tracks in the snow. They just stopped there. And I thought, well, that's weird, So I used some of that in the stories and stuff.
Okay.
And really, nothing weird ever happened to me until I met Monica. I don't know if reading the sub made me more open to it. Like I said, I went out on quite a few Bigfoot hunts and went to this place called Brown Springs,
Yeah.
which is supposed to just be really scary. And, went out there with two of my sons and went out there with another group for a whole weekend, and really nothing happened. And I was kind of disappointed, and I didn't feel anything or hear anything around here. So I was kind of disappointed about that. And I think I always felt like a weird presence in Longpool, Arkansas. And here I'm completely comfortable. So I thought, well, there's nothing to it, And it's funny, I came back from one of those excursions. I was covered in chiggers and ticks. It was August. And I told Monica, I said, you know what? If them things were at Brown Springs, they're not there anymore. Just like if they were ever here, they're not here anymore. And then 2 nights later, I go outside. It was 2018. It was August. And I don't know if you remember. I'm a sky watcher, so Mars was close to the Earth that summer. It was really vivid. And I went outside to look at Mars, and I walked around my wife's car. And when I did, I set off the motion detector, and I was looking up at Mars. But, your eyes pick up movement. And I see movement, and I look down, and right on the edge of our property, there goes this long-haired thing on 2 legs, just booking it right along the property line. And I saw it for about 80 yards. I was about 100 yards from it. Saw it for about 80. It was backlit. There's the Choctaw Church back there on the other side of our property, and it had it backlit. And I remember the weirdest thing was it didn't pump its arms when it ran. It ran like it was in a surfer's pose. And I just thought that was weird. And, I could tell, I thought, that's not a man. There was too much hair. There was long hair down the back. You could see hair on his arm through the backlighting. Now, I couldn't get a color because it was mainly silhouette. But the thing about it just not pumping its arms gave me the creeps. And then it jumped. And so I was on a Bigfoot group on Facebook. And I said, guys, I think I just had a sighting. And I got on there, and well, I didn't know Wes Germer was on there. So you know who he is, right? Sasquatch Chronicles, the guy.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, well, he's supposedly, he's this big shot, and in the Sasquatch world, and has this real famous podcast. Well, he wanted me on his show. Well, his show, everybody's got PTSD. Oh, it scared me so bad. I'm like, dude, it only lasted for maybe 5, 6, 10 seconds tops, if that long. And I don't have PTSD, and I wasn't scared because it was running from left to right. Now, had it been running toward me, I might have been scared, But it really, I just thought it was kind of cool, I didn't find it scary at all. Funny thing was, I go running in the house, Monica. She's like, what? She comes up to me. I said, I just saw a Bigfoot. And she's like, looking in my eyes. She goes, oh, John. Well, a couple of months later, she saw one in the same area. But lucky her, there were 2 of our friends with her. So 3 people saw it. So evidently they're here. You just got to. And the funny thing is as famous as this place is for Bigfoot, the locals are kind of split 50-50. I got like my best friend here down the road. If I mention Bigfoot, he's just laughing in my face. And then there's other people I know that, swear they've seen it.
Right.
He passed away. There was the other gentleman here who was always trying to tell me about a story when he was a kid. His father just left the whole family, and his mom gave him a gun and said, you need to go up on the mountain here and get us a deer. He said, man, I got followed by one of them things. And every time he'd tell me the story, his wife was from the same area here. She, there ain't no such thing as Bigfoot. I've lived here all my life. I've never seen a Bigfoot. And she would do this every time he would tell the story, and he never got to finish it. So the last time he was telling me the story, he's passed away now. He was very elderly. And she started that, and I went to tell her, hey, let him finish the story. I've never got to hear the end of the story. But before I could say it, she said, there ain't no Bigfoot here, but you know what? we saw a flying saucer on the way to Tallahena, and I just never busted out loud. Okay, your UFO is fine, but his Bigfoot's not. So I
Ain't
thought
that the
that was
way it
kind of
works?
humorous. Yeah. So anyway, other
Hey,
stuff
John,
that's happened.
before we
Go ahead.
start, it's time for me to slip off for a commercial break, but I'll be right
Sounds
back.
good.
So
All
write
right.
down, remember where we're at, okay?
All right.
Be right back with you. All right. John's a pistol. Bigfoot, UFOs, especially out in that area. I know next week I'm bringing an exclusive of the Boggy Creek Monster. He's back. He's been seen. He's been possibly kind of photographed, and I got it exclusively, folks. So come back next week. Check that out. But I'm not sure where I quite sit on Bigfoot. Aliens, UFOs, I do agree with. Ghosts, definitely. I've dealt with plenty of them. And you can believe what you deal with, I guess. And while you're thinking about that, you can believe these because these come from an unimpeachable source.
The Unx Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unx Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's Unx Network.
Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details.
Friends, the guy running that conference, Rebels of Disclosure, Tyler Koala, I've done a couple of conferences with him. We've both been speakers there. He's been a guest on my show a couple times. Knows what he's talking about. The guy's really very good at digging up this information. I wrote an article about giants and their bones and their skeletons and their tools and being found, and how the I don't want to say the government exactly, but it's the museum there. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Would come in, get that stuff, and then claim they never got it. The Smithsonian. And when I had him on here talking about the giants, boy, he had information on entire civilizations that had existed of giants, huge doors, and all of this. He's really well up on this. Also brought him back, just a few weeks ago to talk about the secret space fleet. And again, a lot of neat stuff. Really good at what he's doing. So if you're in the Missouri, Illinois area or close, Indiana, I guess Tennessee, Kentucky ain't too far away. You really need to try and get up there to Grafton and check it out. You can check out that website and see if you'd be interested. I think you would. Another of his guests, Lily Nova, has been on the show. Let me say, she brought this video of lights in the sky, and one of them fired what looked like a laser at the other. That one just disappeared. Pretty wild stuff. I was very stunned at that. So you may want to check all this out. There's more to life than you think. More mysteries in heaven and earth, or whatever it was Shakespeare said. But let's bring back John, talk some more about some of the mysteries he's been checking into.
CBD oil, CBD.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
I don't remember. I think there's a C in it.
We'll have to see. Those are usually pretty good products. Well, you were talking about the Giants. I covered that too, and relics too. In fact, one of the characters who's in the army has an encounter with the Kandahar giant. Have you heard of the Kandahar?
Yeah, but for the people who haven't, give us a brief rundown of it.
Well, supposedly there was a military unit. I think it was Army. Ran into it was like one of the biblical giants, or giants like you were speaking of, and actually it attacked them, and they ended up killing it in the end. But I think it killed one of their guys and wounded another, and I don't think it's the only one that's been seen there or reported. And so these could be, Dan, your leftover Nephilim. And it's funny when you were talking about the giants during the break, I was like, Smithsonian, because I think if there is a Bigfoot, and there's whatever it was I saw, it could be a form, it could have some of that DNA in it, who knows? But yeah, I've read a lot about the giants and the bones that are found, and they end up taking them. There's a couple of mounds I wish people could dig in. Of course, I know you don't want to do that because of the Native people's rights and stuff, but it sure would be nice to know what's in there.
Now, you're talking about the mounds in Illinois, right across from St.
Well,
Louis?
yeah, like the Serpent Mound, and is that in Ohio?
I think so.
We got some mounds just north of us here, in fact, near Heavener, the Spiro Mounds, and went out to see them one day, but they were closed. We couldn't get in. But I'd like to go back. But yeah, the mound builders, they're pretty interesting. And it's weird how more often than not, giant bones are found around those mounds. So yes. I think that's pretty neat. Anyway, I was getting to, I don't know. I had a few strange things happen in my life. Mm-hmm. But it was like once I met Monica, and once I started reading all, this stuff coming from Torah and some of the biblical stuff, and, went into Jasher and Enoch and read all that stuff. And it's like all of a sudden, I don't know if I became more receptive or I was paying more attention. Just before we moved out here, it was the autumn before, I'd come home from work, and we had a big above ground pool back in Sulphur Springs. And I was cleaning it. Monica came to tell me something, so I swam over where she was, and I was hanging on the edge looking up at her. And it was just about dusk. And she's talking, and I noticed a stars by her head, and it's like wiggling. It's like doing this. I thought, okay, I got chlorine or something in my eyes. So I wipe my eyes, and then I look at it, and it's making like a triangle. It's just doing, and I'm like, Monica, look, I'm trying to get her to turn. Well, right when she turns around, she sees it, and then the thing just cooks off to the west. I mean, just gone. And she's like, what was that? And I said, I don't know. And now I've looked back and I see this thing, and I know this sounds nuts, but it looked like some kind of superhero or something. But it would look like it wasn't angelic looking to me at all. It was, It kind of had wings and a tan robe, and it had a mask of some type. And I don't know if I was just seeing things from the lights, and then it just kind of dissipated. I'm like, okay, this is too weird. So then, we come out here, and then like a year later, I have this sighting of this thing running along the property line. And I have to wonder, because every time something weird happens to me, I'm standing in the same place out there about the same time at night. In 2021, I made a report on this. We were having a meteor shower. So I was standing out there watching the meteor shower, and everything's like going this way, and it's all green or gold. Right. Well, all of a sudden, I found a picture of something very similar. This big orange football is going the opposite direction. And I'm thinking, dang, that thing's slow. And I'm thinking, it must be low. I think, man, that's going to hit Broken Bow. If it's that low and it's not leaving a big tail, it must be about to drop. And I waited. Nothing happened. Broken Bow is about 45 miles to our south. And nothing happened. So I called MUFON and said, hey, And I've never called MUFON in my life. And I called and reported this. And she said, no, there was a L-1011 or this type of airplane of that type to your north. And I said, no, that would have been opposite the way I'm looking. She goes, well, are you sure it wasn't an airplane? I said, lady, I spent 16 years in the Air Force. All of it was on airplanes, working on airplanes. I know what airplanes look like at night. So no, this wasn't an airplane. And she's like, well, we're going to have to put it as unknown. And I was like, well, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But that happened. And then, like I say, the valley we live in is a mile wide. We're kind of on the slope going up to the north range and south range. So south range is about a mile away. Well, I come out one morning and I was leaving early for work. I had a long way to go that day. And I saw two lights on the mountain over there. And I thought it was guys on four-wheelers driving on a trail up there. Well, one go poop. Go poop. And I went, oh, my God, they drove off a cliff. I'm like, what the heck? And then on the poop, the lights are back up and they're going level again. I'm like, man, that's weird. So and he's dead. Like everybody I know here has been dying. My neighbor was killed in an accident about spring of last year, and he's full-blood Choctaw. And so I asked him, I said, I was like, Dale, do you ever have weird stuff happen? He was like, well, what's weird to you? And so I told him about, the thing I saw running over here. He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, they run down that game path behind my house. He goes, they don't follow the creek down the river. They run through that game trail, hit the woods, and then they drop right in the river right over here. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, and he was just like nonchalant about it. And I was like, okay. And I told him about the lights. He goes, oh, those are the little people. I'm like, what? He goes, the little people. They're these tricksters that live in the mountains around here. And he goes, don't ever follow those lights because they'll take you out and get you lost. I'm like, well, if they're going to go up at 200 feet straight down, I'm not. Don't worry. So that happened, and the UFO happened, and I wonder, because we got a Choctaw cemetery right bordering our property, just right from that hospital. And I told Monica, I said, why don't we pick up anything from that? Where some of the stuff that's happening around here has anything to do with that. I don't know.
Have you picked up a game cam yet and put the cams up?
Yeah, man, I got some great pictures of my dog. Got a lot of pictures of deer. We got a lot of deer here and a lot of pictures of my dog. And I was just like, yeah, this ain't worth the batteries. So I had it out there about a year and never found anything weird on it. Now, one night, Monica was sitting out. We have a fire pit out here. And she was sitting out by the fire pit talking to her daughter on the phone. And I came out, and we've got two sheds and a carport out against the barbed wire fence on the edge of the property. Okay. And I'm looking through the carport, and I see this thing, and I think I see it. But it's this big dark figure just walk by the aft end of the carport. And I'm like, Monica, go in the house. And I must have been convincing because she listened to me. She didn't say a word. She got up, went in the house. And I came in and, I'm like, I didn't like the looks of that. So I grabbed a big gun and I went out there. And there wasn't, I couldn't find anything. I don't know if I just saw it. Yep. I don't know if my eyes are playing tricks on me or I actually saw this thing, but it was pretty impressive. It was impressive enough. I didn't want Monica out there. And and then another night we have this big black dog named Opie, big slobber donkey. He's just friendly as he can be. Well, we're sitting out there and I see him run and just bail out just under my truck. And I go out there and I'm like, Opie, what's wrong? And I look down and there's nothing under the truck. And I look over and he's standing in the yard looking at me. Yeah. And I said, Monica, I just saw. And as soon as I got it, she's like, rebuke it, man. She's just going to town. And I said, what is going on? She goes, this big see-through, big cat panther looking thing just walked right through the flower bed from your truck. And I was like, oh, man, because I didn't tell her why I'd gone to the truck.
Yeah.
So I don't know what goes on out here. It's just a weird place, I guess.
Sounds like a lot's going on.
Yeah, if anybody's interested, look up on Sasquatch Chronicles episode 11, Siege of Honobia. It's spelled Honobia. They call it Honobia out here. If you're interested in the Sasquatch encounters they had out here in the early 2000s, it's pretty interesting. But
you was not on this one, right? They're not taking your story.
No, I didn't even know about this place. Back in 2000, I didn't find it until I was starting to look for a location for the novel, and found it then. So anyway, it's like I don't have a I don't have a shortage of material out here. So, it's funny. I'm like, yeah, that's the weird stuff keep happening. It gives me fuel to write with,
Yeah.
But
let's talk about the books a little bit. I know they are fiction, but there's a lot of stuff in them from your own research.
Yes.
So basically, what does relics explain?
Okay, well, I used relics because it's a term that I had the government using in the book because they're relic hominid, supposedly. And I just thought, there's 1,000 books out there with titles Sasquatch, Bigfoot, this and that. And I like the name relic, so I used it. And that's what the people call them instead of, they will refer to them as Sasquatch, but they call them relics in the book. That's the name that people use for them. Now, I will say without giving too much away, in the first book, you don't realize this thing's going to go towards UFOs and fallen angels. But the poor creatures in the first book are not normal. They're not normal Sasquatch. You don't find this out until book 2. They have implants, and they're just they're a bit bigger, a bit meaner, and a lot smarter than. In fact, by book 2, they've run all the Sasquatch out of here. The normal Sasquatch are scared of them and won't be around them, and they were put here by this fallen angel because he cannot physically touch any of the characters or any of the humans, but his minions can, and so he develops these things. He's putting them here. At first, they were going to be down around Queen Wilhelmina State Park, but there was a plane crash and a fire, and it drove them this way. So this really wasn't where he planned to have them. The forest fire shoved them this way, and then they encounter a group of bikers in chapter 1. And kill them. It was a bad night to be a biker. And so a local police chief, and his name is Sam Redstone, and he's half Choctaw. He starts investigating, and he thinks what's happened is a biker war. Well, his father is full-blood Choctaw and knows these things by other names, Champay and Oklachita, which just means big people. And Champay is kind of it's like they're booger bear or monster to them. So he knows them by those names, and he's trying to convince his son, no, you don't have a biker problem, you have a Sasquatch problem. And the younger son isn't buying into it. And then he figures it out when he actually sees one take one of his female officers and grabs her and runs off with her, and he's figured it out by then. So
I did the second book. What's it called?
Really? Okay, the first book is called Relics, The Dark Autumn. The second book is called Relics, The Honobia Remnant. And it takes place here. And the remnant I'm talking about are the remnant Bigfoot left here. But now this it brings in the UFOs and introduces this fallen angel who's behind all this stuff. So, and then by book 3, we've got, they find something. They come in, Sam and his group of people, they come in possession of something. I'm not going to give it away in book 2. And they can't figure out what it is. So they turn it over to this general that's running this thing called Operation Titan. And he's the one that has the troops out looking for the giants in Kandahar. And, they're kind of like a response force for anything supernatural. In fact, they show up in book 1. That's how the general makes friends with Sam's father, is they show up in book 1 to go after these Sasquatch. But anyway, they give this thing, it's an obelisk. They give it to him, and his employer knows just where it belongs. And I'm not going to ruin it, go with
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they
don't.
use it for. But and then by book 3, they've hooked up with contact from this general, and
Uh-huh.
this guy he's like a James Bond. He's got he's the son of an Israeli ambassador. He was born in Washington D.C., so he's got dual citizenship,
Okay.
and he's done work for the Mossad, and he's done work for the CIA, and he's a real, he's easygoing, but he's a badass, and
Okay.
he's kind of an expert on it. What it's called a polymath, I think. He's kind of knows a little bit about everything, and he's working for an aerospace company that makes real high-end military avionics. Like their biggest thing is called the oh hell, I can't remember the name of that figure that the Hebrews use. But what it does is like an IFF, identify friend or foe box, that like when it's turned on, if somebody interrogates your plane wanting to know, hey, have you got the right proper IFF code, it will automatically shoot back whatever the IFF mode is in their plane. So if you interrogate it, immediately comes back as friend. It doesn't matter what country you're flying for. So he's developed things like this. So he has a lot of money because he only sells them to a few select, countries. So, and this guy gets involved with, and it just kind of takes off from there. The characters that are still active duty military, they have a few issues in book 3, and you have some old flames reunite, and it's just they're fun books. People seem to really like them. It's just
and did you
I'm
say
not a
you have
marketing genius.
another book series you're working on now, or that's
in the fall? In fact, here, let me. That's the first book. That's Relic, and then there's Relics 2 and 3, and then this is the fall. This is the sequel to the Relic series.
Okay. Well, where does that one lead us? Is that with the same fallen angel?
Yeah, it's the same fallen angel, but he's trying to convince the human race that this is the second coming. So he's preempting Satan. He's trying to preempt Satan and get his foot in the door to be the next. He thinks the time is right to play his hand.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And I'm currently working on the sequel to the fall, and it's called Enigma Team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be those guys going after. What he's done, he's taken over. This fallen angel's pretty much taken over Vienna, and Vienna, Switzerland. Is it Vienna? Dude, man, 2 sessions of chemotherapy will wreck your head. He's in Switzerland, and he's taken over there. He's landed there. He's set his headquarters up at CERN, is where he set everything up at CERN. So that's Geneva and Cessy, France. So yeah, and forgive my short memory. I am coming off 2 chemo treatments, and both of them put me in the hospital. So you're my first interview, in fact, since I got to the hospital last time. So,
well, I'm glad you came on.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. I've really enjoyed it.
With your investigation and all the things you've done, what's your opinion in the real world here?
Of what things are?
Yeah.
Okay, well, after years, especially the UFOs, for years and years and years, I had an interest in them. I read almost everything that would come out.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm kind of like, I'm in the camp that they're not extraterrestrial. I think they're interdimensional. Because we never see them in deep space. We never see them coming. Really, they're always they're here and they're gone. And I'm wondering, is it angel technology? Is it, if it's some heavenly being, angels are heavenly being, but is it interdimensional, or are we, there's so much we don't know, but it makes more sense on how quick things disappear that they would be interdimensional. Now, I've just come across that the last 5 or 6 years I've been going that route, but, and everything, everything's controlled in vibrations, and all this stuff they're finding out, and it makes me think they just may be in another dimension. They're able to cross over into ours.
Now you're talking the UFOs, but what about the cryptids? Because
I think
apparently they're doing the
I
same.
think they may be a product of the same thing, Dan.
Okay.
How do you explain tracks that just stop?
Yeah.
And people, I tell people they come here and they're going Bigfoot hunting, and where would you go? I said, I'd just go find some place to sit down. I said, it doesn't matter. I said, you're not going to chase one down. I don't think you are anyway. If you're going to see one, it's just going to be dumb luck, like I had. And I don't think you can hunt them. Now, there's people that disagree with me, honestly, and there's people know a heck of a lot more about Bigfoot than I do. I thought it was funny. I was, as I was researching for the first book, I was listening to guys like Ron Moorhead and Ken Gerhardt and what's the other guy with the hat? Lyle Blackburn.
Lyle, yeah.
Yeah. Scott Nelson, M.K. Davis. And then all of a sudden, one day, I'm up on the same stage with them speaking at a Bigfoot conference. They go, "Oh, this is weird," but it was fun.
You got the cryptids. Does the ghosts or any of that make any appearance, or is this pretty strictly the?
Well, I haven't used ghosts, and now you're a ghost hunter. That's your thing,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you can have that. I don't want to be part of that. That stuff scares me. I don't know why. There's other stuff doesn't scare me, but the ghost thing, I don't like that at all.
You're saying this 7.5, 8 foot tall, muscular creature that throws rocks and disappears doesn't scare you, but a ghost does.
Well, he's going to have to disappear before that 45-70 round gets there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So yeah, if I go out hunting,
I mean, and I'm sure I look everything from a biblical standpoint, and so what I may not be on the same track as you, but I do believe they're ghosts. Now, I don't believe Granny comes back and pats your cheek and tells you everything's going to be all right. I really think, and this is just my opinion, and everybody's got one, but if you think about the evil, the demons, people confuse. They think demons and fallen angels are the same thing. They're not. Actually, supposedly demons are the spirits of the dead Nephilim. They can't go to heaven and they can't go to hell. There's no place for them. So they wander the earth looking to, if they can get a body to use where they can eat and drink and, feel alive again. That's what they want. Now that may not be and I'm not an expert on ghosts. I don't study them. I don't study demons. I kind of keep that stuff at an arm's length. So what I'm saying may sound pretty elementary to you or just outright ridiculous, but that's just how I see things. And but that's in a field I don't study. So
all right. Well, John, I hate to say it, but boy, this hours went by fast.
Boy, it did. It really did.
Back out. So what's your plans for now? You've got one book coming out, a beginning of a new series. Is that right?
Well, actually, the first book of the series is out. I'm writing the sequel to the first book.
Okay.
I've got another youth book coming out. I have all these as well that I write. I've written 3 of them. And I'm putting a new one of these out. Shadow Chasers. These are for young adults. But the adults seem to like them as well as they like the Relic book. I think because their characters are in there still, I've used the same cops and stuff for these kids' books. But yeah, just keep writing, get this cancer beat back.
Yes.
And just live life and enjoy life as best I can.
And it's relicsbooks.com, right?
Yeah, www.relicsbooks.com.
All right. Well, John, thanks for coming on because I'm going to have to slide out, but let's talk again.
Yes, let's do. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You were really interesting, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Take care. Well, you heard John, and his is not a odd or different point of view. I've heard before that the giants that used to be around, and I've found evidence or the stories of our American Indian tribes getting together to stop those things because they were cannibals. They were eating people, and killed a bunch of them up in Nevada, I think it was. Got them into a cave and set fire in front of the cave and took the oxygen out. And there's others. Steelville, Missouri, in 1915. A boy was looking for arrowheads and found this giant skeleton. The local doctor ended up putting this, I think it was 10, 12-foot skeleton out in his office where everybody for weeks come to see this thing. And then the Smithsonian asked for it. They got it, sent by train. And after about a year, the doctor wanted to know where it was at, and they said they never received it. They have no idea what he was talking about. That, as John said, that comes up over and over again, where the Smithsonian just seems to misplace these things or deny ever receiving them. One of the things Tyler was talking about was the Smithsonian not letting people into certain areas, making this claim. There's a lot going on there. So if you're into lost civilizations and lost history, might want to check into that a little deeper. If you are into ghosts and cryptids and UFOs, you do need to look into the UNX network. Go to unxnetwork.com. If you become a member, first page, drop down a little bit. There's a place to become a member. You get the magazine each month sent to you by email, and you can buy paper copies. Some of the best writers in these fields are putting stories in these magazines. I have several in these. This is our most recent, and I did a story in that one strictly about haunted dolls, because dolls creep me out, whether they're haunted or not. They just always creep me out. But anyway, a lot of interesting stuff there, and it's all yours for joining the Unnext Network. But for now, I'm going to slide out because it's time for me to go. So, friends, I want you to keep in mind, stay calm. Summertime's coming. Stay warm. And I think the most important thing of all I can ask you is stay spooked. Good night.